unpopular opinion. Having a good camera does not make you a photographer, and the camera that you use does not determine whether you're going to be a successful creator or not. You could use the most expensive camera in the world and still have garbage content. You can also use the cheapest camera in the world and still have good content. The camera doesn't matter for a content creator, just as much as having a good camera doesn't make a photographer a photographer. But when I tell you this camera, the Sony a7S III that I've now had for 2 years, made me a better creator, I ain't even playing. So 2 years ago, I bought this bad boy. I can't believe it's been 2 years, honestly, but 2 years ago, I bought this camera. And I bought this camera and the lens I'm actually shooting on right now, and this setup was more than my first car. Honest to Pete, more than my first car. And I had no real reason to buy it. Like, I had no real reason to go out and spend $6,000 or whatever it was on the body and the lens. Like, no real reason at all. But I wanted it, and here we are. It was also around the same time that I got my first studio, and I was just really feeling my creator vibes, you know? And up until that point, I had filmed on a lot of smaller, cheaper cameras, and they did the job just fine. Like, I made it to 100,000 subscribers, over 100,000 subscribers, with cameras that were $700 or less. The first several months of my channel, I used my iPhone, and back then, the iPhone was not near as good as it is now. Now the iPhone is spectacular, and you would be doing really well to start a YouTube channel with an iPhone. But when I started, it not so much. But I did it, and it worked. And then I upgraded to my DSLR camera, which I was not aware was not made for video. I started seeing people using their DSLRs as video cameras. And I was like, oh, well, I have a DSLR because I've always loved photography and I've always had like a big camera. And I'm like, oh, well, that's what I'll use, but it wasn't made for video. So the autofocus was absolute trash. And not only was it trash, but it was loud. So every time I'd film a video, like if I'd move and it would try and like, you know, adjust to my face, it would freak out, and it did not turn out well. Then I got the holy grail of cameras for the creator, the Canon G7X. This was like the thing that all the people talked about circa 2016, 2017, and it did the job. It is now my husband's vlog camera and has seen better days. And then see this white camera right here that I'm now using as a webcam. That's a Canon M50, the first generation, the Mark I. That was the next step up. That's what I used after the little point and shoot G7X. And when I started filming videos in this house, which is always like a marker for me, like in the different houses I've been in, but when I moved into this house in 2019, which was almost 4 years ago, and that is bananas. I mean, bananas. Like, it almost doesn't feel possible. Hashtag COVID time warp thing. That's the camera I was using. Now, I was not using that lens on it, and I wish I was. That is a 16mm 1.6 lens, and it is beautiful, and it's really pretty for my webcam, but that is what I used for a long time until I got this camera in 2020. And I tell you all of that to, again, reiterate that it does not matter. It doesn't matter what your gear is. It doesn't matter what you're using. I've used like all the things. And I've lugged this bad boy around with me on trips and like to sporting events and stuff like that. So it served me a purpose beyond creating content, but it doesn't matter what you use. And I need to say that before I get into why this made me a better creator, but it really doesn't matter. But this camera literally flipped a switch in here somewhere. It's like buying this camera made a light bulb go off, and it made me a better creator. And I want to talk about why. You see, I have always loved photography. Like always, always. If you watched the video about my summer project, then you know this story, but I have literally loved photography since like my first memory. My grandma bought me an 8mm camera when I was little. She bought me the National Geographic cards that I talked about in that video that like really inspired me. And up until about 8th grade, photographer was always like top of the list on what I wanted to do. It was a National Geographic photographer for a while till I realized I would be eaten. And then I was gonna be a photographer in the Army. And then I remember one of my 8th grade teachers was like, you know, that's cool, but just so you know, you do still have to go through like basic training and like do all the things that like Army people do. And also you're gonna have to take pictures of like not good things. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. No desire to go through basic training, nor to take pictures of dead people. So after that, I started like going down different paths, but I always loved photography. I took photography as long as they'd let me in high school. I took an extra class in college that I had to like drive an hour away to take for photography because it wasn't in my major. I worked in the photo lab as one of my first jobs and as one of my favorite jobs when there was still like a 1 hour photo lab. And I sold digital cameras when they first started coming out. And just all in all, I love photography. Love it so much. It has always been a big part of my life. Actually, my first business was a photography business. So like, you get it. I've always loved photography. And there's nothing like getting a new camera and getting to test it out and getting to play with it and getting to like push its limits and test its features and learn new things. For whatever reason in my brain, up until I got this camera, my thought was just, let's buy the easiest to use camera to get this content done, because the purpose of the content was just to drive sales to the business. And like, I didn't need anything fancy for that, right? I didn't need to like take my time to learn a new system or whatever. But then I got it in my hands and I had no idea how to use it. I was like, oh, okay, I need to figure this thing out. So I started exploring the internet, exploring the YouTube tutorials, like going down the rabbit holes and learning to use this camera and learning to use video on manual mode, because I've been shooting photography on manual mode my entire life. So like, how do I use video in manual mode, right? Like, what are the settings? Testing it out, taking it to like my kids' sporting events or like whatever, just like trying everything I could to learn this camera. And then once I learned like the settings and all of that good stuff, I started learning about log footage and how much easier it is to color grade and how it's very similar in the video world to raw photos in the photography world. And I was like, oh, I really want to work that muscle. And then I started playing with editing and different tricks and things that were just making the actual process of creating content more fun for me, which that alone made me a better creator. Because when it's more fun, I want to do it more. When it's more fun, I have more ideas. I'm more inspired. I'm more excited to create content. But then it also led me down a path to find creators that really pushed my creative thoughts and ideas to another level. See, before I went down this path, before I went through this process, the only people I really followed on YouTube were fellow creators like myself. Fellow business owners, people who were teaching business or marketing or strategy or YouTube or whatever. But being exposed to a whole nother set of creators who were teaching me about cameras or teaching me about editing or teaching me about whatever exposed me to a whole nother level of creativity. And it made me a better creator. It made me realize that I needed to be better at storytelling, that I needed to be better at filming, that I needed to be better at incorporating B-roll into my stuff. And I'm still not great at that. And I don't want to say that and be like, oh yeah, I'm good at it. I'm really not. But it's got the wheels spinning up here. And over the last 2 years, I've created pieces of content that I am so proud of from a creative aspect that all stemmed from getting this camera. And here's the thing, it's not the camera. I could have gotten any camera that would have done the same thing. It's not this particular camera. It's the fact that I enjoyed creating content more with it, that I was wanting to learn, that I was taking my time, and it wasn't just a task to check off the to-do list. That honestly took me from creating content with the pure purpose to grow the brand, grow the business, grow the whatever, to creating content because I'm a creative and that is what I want to do, to being a content creator. And that is where the switch happened. So honestly, I can attribute getting this camera to me realizing that I can be a full-time content creator. That YouTube doesn't have to just be a vehicle where I throw content on the internet that does well in search and people find me that way. That I can actually create content on here that's more personal and less like tutorial based. So much so that this thing is heavy. The setup I have right now is heavy, okay? It is, I don't know how many pounds it is, but it's a lot because the body itself is heavy. I've got a big old lens on it. I did recently get a 20 millimeter 1.8 lens for it, which makes the setup so much lighter and easier to vlog with. But this camera is something I love so much that even if I'm vlogging, and it would be a hell of a lot easier to use a camera this size. I don't know where my Sony ZV-1 is, but that's the one I would use. But it's so much easier to vlog with a camera this size, right? Or my phone. But I want this camera because I want to push my limits. I want to use this camera to vlog. Even though your girl is strong and has muscles, but carrying a camera this heavy, like out like this, is very freaking hard, but it has ruined me. I want to use it all the time. So here's the most important message here. It's not to go buy this camera. It's not that your camera matters or that you need a camera that costs as much as your first car to be a successful creator, because that's not it. The message here is to find ways to make creating content fun. For you, it may be, I can't use a big camera because it overwhelms me and then it's not fun anymore. Then use a point and shoot camera like the Sony ZV-1. That's okay. If it's inspiring you, that's the point. It has nothing to do with the camera itself. It has everything to do with the way it makes you feel, with the way it intrigues you, with the way it makes you a better creator. Because if you want to be a full-time creator on this platform, you have to love creating content. If you want to be a full-time creator on any platform, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, whatever, you have to love creating content. And then you also have to love the process. You have to love the journey just as much as the destination. Some people need different things for that. Like, I needed to feel challenged. I needed to feel like, okay, I need to learn this camera and I need to figure these things out. I needed that to inspire me to be more creative with my content, to get where I wanted to be as a content creator. Again, you may just need to ditch the cameras, like get away from the big camera, and you may need to just go to your phone because that's gonna make you a better creator. You may need to get out of your office or get out of your house or get out of your town or whatever to put yourself in a scenario that pushes your creative boundaries. So what is your camera? And I don't mean what is your camera, I mean what is your camera? Like in this analogy, what is your camera? What is the thing that's gonna make you a better creator? What is the thing that's gonna make you love it more? What is the thing that's gonna push your boundaries? What is the thing that's gonna make you excited to create content? Because I don't know what that is for you, but whatever it is, you need to find it. It could be that it's just you haven't found a set of creators that inspires you yet. It could be that you haven't really tapped into what you want to create content about that inspires you yet. It could be that everything overwhelms you and it makes it really hard to be inspired, but figure out what you need to work that muscle. Figure out what you need to make you love creating content. Because if you love it, you'll stay consistent. If you love it, you'll do it for the long term. If you love it, you'll keep coming back. If you love it, your viewers will see that, which will make them want to come back for your content every time. And if you love it, you'll continue to push the boundaries and get better and better every single time you film a video. So what is your camera? What inspires you? What makes you feel like creating content? What makes you excited to create content? I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. And I think that's all. Bye, y'all.